Okay, hello. So YouTube tells me I'm live. So I have no reason to believe that I'm not live unless you tell me I'm not live. So hello, would you please, whoever is out there, do me a favor and just type a little message so I know that you can hear me and that I don't have any technical issues. So just say, hi, Gigi, happy Wednesday. We're all so happy to be alive. That type of thing would serve perfectly. And we just need to hang around as we always do for all of those tardy people who don't show up bang on time. I am live. Thank you, Cameron. Thank you for letting me know. And Mo, welcome. Wanderlust R. Hello, Wanderlust R. I love that phrase, Wanderlust. It's so full of, it's very evocative, isn't it? Anyway, so good choice of name. So hello, welcome. Happy Wednesday. It's Wednesday evening here in the UK. It's pitch black and it's freezing. So as you can see, I'm not wearing my usual kind of branded stuff because I was too cold. I've spent my day dressed like this and I couldn't be bothered to put on my Amazon interview with stuff. So this is my favorite Christmas jumper. I know it's holidays for the US. I suppose I'm not supposed to say Christmas, am I? So yes, I've had this jumper for a long time and I love this jumper. So there you go, meet my favorite Christmas jumper. So whilst we wait for other people to rock on up, hey, let's just say hello. There's only a few of us on here today so far. Hopefully other people will show up because we have an exciting show ahead of us today. I put on my favorite lipstick and my new glasses just for the occasion. So Cameron, where are you coming to us from? Same with Mo and Wanderlust. Where are you come from? And I hope it's a lot warmer where you are than where I am. Let me know. I love to know where you're from. Let me know. Say hello. Whilst I'm waiting for you to respond to that, to say hello, let me just explain how we're going to work today. Oh, so Mo, you're in London too. It's 9 degrees where I am, so I'm not far from you. So it's probably about the same temperature where you are. I hope you've got your heating on. I'm freezing now. We've had to turn on our heating. So Mo, you're from London. Wanderlust, you're from Canada. Oh, you're probably thinking 9 degrees, you wuss. That's tropical for us here in Canada. And you would be right. I could never go and live in Canada. My husband laughs at me. He says I would literally freeze to death if I went to live in Canada. Sandy from the US, VA. Ooh, Virginia? Is that Virginia? I'm really bad with the shortenings of the US states. So I'm sorry if I've got that wrong. Let me know if I've got wrong. And Cameron, you're in Iowa. Yeah, I bet it does get cold in Iowa, actually. Jonathan S. Hey, Jonathan, welcome. Everyone's just introducing themselves and letting me know where they're all from, and I'm being jealous or not as regards the temperature in those locations. I am a bit obsessed with temperature. I am actually wearing thermals as well. I'm pathetic. I am pathetic. All right, so let me just tell you how I'm going to run today, and hopefully other people will show up. If not, hey, it's just us, whatever. I'm going to do a little bit of a key topic today. So I did say a while ago that I would do some key topics for these sessions. So Mondays I don't do a key topic, but I do it on Wednesdays. I don't do it on Mondays because I would run out of key topics very quickly. And I do 2 sessions a week. So key topic wise, I'm going to cover off questions that I've had on bar raisers, because this is a huge place of anxiety for all of you doing your interviews with Amazon, and it doesn't need to be. Plus, there's a whole load of, I'm not allowed to swear, I don't think, on YouTube. So there's a whole load of BS out there about bar raisers and a whole bunch of people trying to make money off your anxiety by telling you that there's some magic about bar raisers and they're going to teach it to you, and there isn't, and there won't. So I'm going to cover that off as a topic, and then we'll do our usual Q&A. So we've had a few more people arrive. Oh, Jonathan, you're in Houston. Yeah. I was going to say Houston's Texas, isn't it? So I wouldn't have expected it to be cold there. Although I guess maybe it must get cold sometimes. Anyway, moving on. Let me do my intro and then sure, we'll just get going, and whoever rocks up, rocks up. So as I guess you know, I am Gigi and I am the Amazon Interview Whiz. I was a senior leader at Amazon for quite a few years. Obviously, I was a hiring manager. I had a large team, about 28 people, which is very big in Amazon terms. And I was also a bar raiser. So we'll talk about bar raisers a bit later. But the special thing about bar raisers as compared to anybody you'll hear that is maybe a recruiter or a hiring manager talking to you about the Amazon interview process is bar raisers will experience many, many different job families, and they'll bar raise on many different job families and across many different countries and across tech and non-tech. If you're a recruiter, chances are you'll really only have interviewed either recruiters or for your particular specialty, whether it's product managers or SDEs or vendor managers or whatever it is, but you're very kind of focused on a particular group of people. Same with hiring managers or normal interviewers at Amazon. You really only tend to interview around your particular skill set, maybe an adjunct team. But again, relatively limited perspective on the interview process at Amazon. As a bar raiser, you interview across all sorts of different job families. I've interviewed across dozens of different job families. I have never bothered counting them, but many countries, and also tech and non-tech. So I have a real deep understanding of the Amazon interview process. I know exactly what it takes to get hired, and I've personally given the go to hire hundreds of Amazonians. I now run my own Amazon interview preparation. I'll call it ecosystem. I have buckets loads of free content, which I know you know about here on YouTube, very specific, very actionable. I also have my own Amazon Interviewers Academy, where I offer digital paid for courses, which are intended to be as affordable as they possibly can be. One-to-one coaching from Amazon interview preparation can cost anything from $200. I know there are people charging like $750 an hour for this preparation. I'm not sure I think that I'm comfortable with that. Lots of people can't afford that, which is why I've created my digital courses and this free YouTube channel. So part of it is this Q&A session, which you're going to make the most of by asking me some questions. So how it works is you ask questions down the comments chat thing in the side there. I will try and pick them up. I'll answer as many questions as I can in the time. If you have very specific questions that are very kind of technical and specific to your particular role, I might not be able to answer them. There are thousands of different role types in Amazon. No one person can know everything about everything. So I will do my best, but chances are I may not be able to answer a question. So I will let you know if that's the case. Broadly speaking, I can pretty much tell you everything about the process, interview strategy, what they're looking for, etc. All right, so with that said, let me do what I said I would do, which is I'm going to just crash through bar raisers and try and give you a view of the questions I get asked regularly. And if you, whilst I go through this, have particular questions that are specific to bar raisers or about bar raisers, put them in the comments box down there and I'll try and address them as well. And also, if you get bored, let me know. I'm doing this because generally the consensus was a key topic is useful. But hey, I don't want to tell you stuff you don't want to know. So if you get bored, you can literally type boring, GG, move on. That'd be fine, because I hear that all the time from my family who think I'm not funny and boring. I said they don't realize it really, but they do. Oh, do you know what? I've realized I've got this weird light on in my room and now I look like I'm sunburnt, but I won't bother turning it off. You'll just have to cope with weird sunburnt looking GG. All right, so let's talk bar raisers. So what's a bar raiser? So a bar raiser is a particular role in Amazon. It's not a full-time job. You do it on top of your normal job. And the responsibility of a bar raiser is they get involved at the very final stage of interview, which is called loop or a panel, whatever. Different people call it different things. And their responsibility is to oversee that process. There is some admin stuff involved. So you have to, as a bar raiser, make sure that the panel setup is diverse and you've got a good mix of people. You have to check that the people on the panel have enough experience of interviewing to interview on their own. If they haven't got much experience, you have to arrange for someone to shadow them. So there's a whole bunch of admin-y type stuff around it. The other part of the responsibility of the bar raiser is they're the ultimate decision maker as to whether someone gets hired or not. That doesn't mean to say they are the only person whose opinion counts, and we'll go into that in a few minutes. But ultimately, for someone to get hired at Amazon, the bar raiser has to rubber stamp it and say, yes, I believe this is the right person to hire for this role and for Amazon. They are probably not going to be they won't be from the specific team that is hiring. They are a third party and they're there to be unbiased so that any kind of urgency around putting a bum on a seat or any personal bias within the other interviewers is negated. And they are there to be that kind of third party objective person. And what they do ultimately is they will interview a candidate. So one of the rounds that you have in your final loop, or one of the interviews you have in your final loop, will be with a bar raiser. then the second part of their job is to bring everybody together in what's called a debrief, and it's a 30-minute session, and help guide everyone through the data that has been gathered on the candidate through the course of the interview process, and help bring everyone, if possible, to a decision as to whether the group are inclined or not inclined to hire the candidate. They are the facilitator of that meeting. And then the third thing that they do, which most of you probably won't know about, but it's a really, really, really important part of the bar raiser's role, which is actually to coach the other interviewers. So the responsibility of the bar raiser is to make sure that anybody who's interviewing on that panel is executing that at the right standards, at the right quality that would be expected of an Amazonian. So another part of that job is to meet some of your panel offline if you need to, and help coach them and give them feedback on their interview kind of process, tools, methodology, bar thinking, etc. So those are the three things that are the responsibility of a bar raiser. You become a bar raiser by basically being headhunted. Another bar raiser will probably spot you on an interview panel that you've been on for them, identify you as a strong interviewer, but also someone who's very good at managing a dynamic in a room. And you go through a training course, and you have to practice doing bar raising. You have a mentor. They have to write a document to convince a core group of bar raisers that you should be qualified as a bar raiser. And then you get through. So that's what a bar raiser is. Just checking that no one's yelling, boring, boring, boring. No one yet. Some questions that I get asked all the time about bar raisers that I want to dispel. So the first is, are bar raisers given specific leadership principles? So I'm sure you all know that your interviewers will be assigned leadership principles, and they ask you questions based on those leadership principles. So I'm often asked, does the bar raiser get given specific leadership principles? So no, leadership principles are assigned to the group at complete random by the recruiter, or based on the request made from the hiring manager. If there's someone on the panel who they think is particularly good at a particular leadership principle, they'll ask for them to be assigned that, but otherwise assigned at random. Next question then, are there particular questions on each leadership principle that are reserved for bar raisers? So again, you'll probably know that the Amazon have a question bank where all of the questions that align to each leadership principle are held, and an interviewer can choose from that question bank, or they can make them up themselves. And some people think that there are special questions reserved in that for a bar raiser. No, there aren't. The bar raiser will go to the question bank and will probably pick their favorite question. Yes, many Amazonians have favorite questions per leadership principle. If they're assigned a leadership principle, they'll just go to the question bank, pick one that they like, and then they'll use those, or pick a few that they like and then use those. So the next one, this one really bugged me actually, because I saw a video on YouTube talking about the most common questions asked by bar raisers, which just seemed to me to be utter nonsense because, and here I've done a spoiler. Here's the question. Are there questions that bar raisers are more likely to ask? Well, unsurprisingly, based on what I told you a second ago, no. There are definitely not more common questions asked by bar raisers. They just ask whatever they want, whatever is their most favorite. So please, anything that you see where they purport to be able to tell you what you're most likely to be asked by bar raisers is complete nonsense. So please ignore that. Okay, so the next question is, are bar raisers likely to have been at Amazon a long time / longer than other members of the panel? No. So to be a bar raiser, you do have to have done a certain number of interviews. It used to be 30, if I remember rightly, 30 or 35. You have to have hit that number of interviews before you can qualify to be a bar raiser. That's pretty easy to hit. Most interviewers interview, or most people at Amazon interview maybe once a week, something like that. So it's pretty quick to get to 35. So not necessarily. There are plenty of people who are just standard interviewers who have been at Amazon for many, many, many years who choose not to become bar raisers. So don't look on LinkedIn for the person on your interview panel, if you've got their names, who's been at Amazon the longest, and assume that they're the bar raiser. Very regularly, not the case. Next one then. This is a good one. So if the bar raiser wants to hire me, but nobody else does, will I still get hired? No, is the answer to that. So the job of a bar raiser is to pull together all of the data that has been gathered and to help the team sort through that data and try and come to some kind of a consensus if possible. 100% consensus is not necessary. A split loop, and where some people think yes and some people no, is a potential outcome that's acceptable as long as the hiring manager and the bar raiser agree. But generally or genuinely, if there's really good evidence from everybody else that you really aren't raising the bar and you just happen to do really well in the one bar raiser interview, likelihood is the bar raiser will accept that theirs was an outlier and that the rest of the data indicates that you are not raising the bar, and they are very likely to change their view on whether to be inclined or not inclined. On many, many occasions, I flipped my vote in both directions, actually. But on many occasions, I flipped my vote because as a bar raiser, you're much more likely to be really open-minded about the other data that's been gathered. Okay, so the next question is in the flip. If a bar raiser doesn't want to hire me, but everyone else does, will I not get hired? No, same thing applies. Bar raiser is going to be really open-minded. So if they believe that their data gathering was an outlier and the rest of the data proves really, really consistently that you are actually bar raising, then they'll take that into account and they will adjust their vote accordingly. So bar raisers more than anyone are willing to being open-minded. So all of this advice where people say to you, make sure you nail the bar raiser round. That's the round you absolutely have to nail. It's not true. You have to nail every single round because your bar raiser of all of the people on your panel is going to be open-minded to looking at the data from other people's interviews and taking that seriously on board. Okay, next one to take you through then. Will the bar raiser ask me technical skills-based questions? So in tech roles, very possibly, because although the bar raiser can't come from exactly the same team that you are interviewing for, they can very easily come from another team, but from the same skill set. So it's super easy to have a bar raiser who's a solutions designer in one team in AWS being bar raising on a role for a solutions designer on a team somewhere else in AWS that isn't actually connected to their team, because they can still be objective, unbiased third party and have the skill set. So that is possible that you'll find a bar raiser is also able to ask you technical competency questions. In the non-tech side, that's much less common. So, for example, you're likely to have someone who, or you will have someone who isn't, let's talk about procurement. There we go. So on a procurement loop, you won't have someone from procurement as your bar raiser. It's very unlikely. And therefore, any of the technical nature associated with procurement, I don't mean kind of tech as in coding, but really kind of the technical discipline of procurement, they're unlikely to ask you questions about that because they're probably not going to know the specifics of what's good practice and what's bad practice in procurement. But on the tech side, when it comes to solutions designers, software development engineers, all those types of things, it is very possible that your bar raiser is also technically sound and can ask you technical questions. Okay, next one then. And we're almost at the end if you are starting to lose the will to live. I hope not, but you know. Is a bar raiser looking for special things? And my answer, right, this is another thing that I saw online somewhere and I wanted to shoot myself. No, they're absolutely not looking for anything that nobody else is looking for. So everybody on your loop is going to be looking for exactly the same things, which is, are you raising the bar in the leadership principle? So are you demonstrating all the behaviors that they expect or want you to demonstrate in the leadership principle that they're testing you on? And do you have long-term Amazon growth potential? Now, your bar raiser is probably going to care a little bit more about that than the hiring manager, because the hiring manager is probably much more focused on this role than they are on the long term. But the bar raiser will force them to think about the long term anyway. So are there special things they're looking for? Absolutely not. Everybody's looking for exactly the same thing. Will my bar raiser interview be tougher than my other interviews? No, not necessarily. So there are plenty of other interviewers who are not bar raisers, who are really rigorous interviewers. They've simply not chosen to become bar raisers. They may be excellent, excellent interviewers, but they may have chosen not to become a bar raiser because they don't like the other aspects of bar raising, the admin stuff, and also the meeting facilitation. It's much more important actually to be a really strong meeting facilitator as a bar raiser than it is to be a really, really good interviewer. So there will be loads of interviewers out there who are awesomely strong and will challenge you to the nth degree in a way that maybe even your bar raiser won't, particularly if they don't have the technical knowledge. So will it be the toughest interview you have? I don't think so. I think there will be plenty of other interviews you'll find that may be tougher than your bar raiser interview. And then very finally, question around graduates. So do graduate roles get interviewed by bar raisers? So no. On MBAs and graduate programs where the interviewing is done in a slightly different way, it's kind of done en masse. Bar raisers don't get involved in the interview process, but they do get involved in the debrief process. So when it comes to graduates, what happens is everybody that's been involved in the interview process meets in a giant room, and there's like, I don't know, like 30 people. Debriefs on graduates are really challenging. There's about 30 people in a room, and the bar raiser helps facilitate that, or facilitates that meeting. They go through each individual candidate, and the interviewers actually tell the bar raiser what they feel about that candidate and discuss it between the two of them. And the interviewer, the bar raiser, has to simply listen to that data, having never met any of these candidates before, and help come to a decision as to whether that candidate is bar raising or not. Okay, so that's everything I could think about that's the complete nonsense that I hear online, or questions that people ask me regularly about bar raisers. So if you have any other questions that I didn't cover and you want to know the answer, feel free to drop it into the comments over there on the right. Otherwise, I hope that was useful. Why don't we get on with the usual Q&A, and I will attempt to answer all of your very good questions. And I will say hello to people as they arrive as well. So we've got Anna from London. Hello, Anna from London. I hope you are well. Okay. All right, Eduardo. All right, so, okay, you had your panel yesterday and you received the same question twice from different interviewers, and you assume one person was a bar raiser. Does that give you any buffer during the discussion? Okay, so this is always a tricky one, Eduardo, because technically speaking, it shouldn't be possible for you to be asked exactly the same question from two different interviewers, because they'll each have been assigned different leadership principles. That said, there are questions within each leadership principle that sometimes sound very similar. So, for example, there is a question on earned trust, which is about a time when people disagreed with your point of view. And there is also a question in Have Backbone, Disagree and Commit, where they talk about, tell me about a time where you made a suggestion and other people were opposed to it. They're from two different leadership principles. Trust me, they are there. They sound incredibly similar. One is they're trying to find out about earned trust, and the other is they're trying to find out about Have Backbone, Disagree and Commit. The questions sound very similar. The follow-up questions from the interviewer should be different. One to try and get out, how did you deal with it? Who did you talk to? What did you say? What did they say to you? How did you feel? How did they feel? And the other one will be about Have Backbone. How did you present your case? Did you use data? What did you do when the data was defunct? Did you go and get other data? When the decision went against you, what did you do? So maybe you got exactly the same question, but I think it's unlikely. I think what you got was two very, very similar questions. Does it give you any buffer during discussion? I have seen instances as a bar raiser where the same question, although it shouldn't have been, the same question was asked. But once I think I've seen that. And in which case, if you gave exactly the same answer, then they'll just discard one of your answers and just focus on the other. So does it give you any buffer during discussion? I'm not really sure what you mean by buffer exactly, but I'm not. Hopefully what would have happened is, even if you had the same answer, your interviewers would have asked different follow-up probing questions and gathered some data by going through different routes of follow-up questions. So I'm not quite sure how to answer the point about buffer, because I don't really know what that means, but I think it's unlikely that you got exactly the same question. Oh, Samesh is here. Hey, Samesh, how you doing? Oh, Eduardo, you come from Luxembourg. Nice. Oh, you're 1 hour ahead of me, aren't you? It's almost 7 where you are. Okay. Okay. Ashkay, I'm sorry, I can't give you a customer obsession answer for a TPM role because I'm not a TPM. So I can't tell you what I would have done on customer obsession, and neither have I memorized leadership principle answers for every single job family in Amazon. So I'm sorry, I cannot answer that question for you. But hopefully you can answer it for yourself, because you need to be thinking about, as a technical program manager, a time when somebody in your team, your customers, who are the people who are you're helping deliver the program for, need support. You either went above and beyond for them, they wanted to do something and you didn't think they should do it that way. You helped coach them into thinking of an alternative solution. I'm sure you've got buckets of customer obsession examples in your career history. Okay. Oh, good question, this one here. Hey, Says, how you doing? So do your results in the online assessment come into play at any point after you've made it into the interview process? That's a really good question. And the answer is no. It's a filter step. So effectively, and I definitely have a video about this on my YouTube channel in terms of the online assessment. It's a really good video, by the way. It's got lots and lots and lots of very specific detail in it. Effectively, you do the assessment, the data is pulled, and you are assigned into one of 5 buckets. The bottom bucket is discarded. No one who finds themselves in the bottom bucket can be interviewed. The other 4 buckets, basically the hiring manager and the recruiter have already decided for the role which of those buckets they're willing to pull from in order to interview people. Once you're pulled from the bucket they've decided they're going to pull from and made it interview, that's it. That information is no longer needed and is discarded. So no, it's simply a filter. I hope that was helpful. Oh, okay. Cameron, could you be asked the same question in the final loop that the hiring manager asked? Okay, so I'm going to pull that back a little bit and say, could you be asked the same question in the final loop that somebody has asked you already? Technically speaking, yes, of course it's possible. It's definitely possible that somebody asks you a question that you've already been asked. Now, it shouldn't happen in the loop because everyone's got different leadership principles, as I was saying at the beginning, but it is possible that someone has been assigned the same leadership principle in loop that someone was assigned in the second round or in the first round. Now, in theory, if your interviewer has done their due diligence and done their homework properly, they should have read the notes that already exist on the system from your earlier interviews, spotted which questions you were asked, and avoided asking you that question. But I can tell you from my experience that a lot of Amazonians don't do that and they aren't doing their due diligence. So it's absolutely possible for you to be asked exactly the same question in later rounds than you were asked in earlier rounds. If that happens to you, Cameron, this is my suggestion. You should say to your interviewer, I just want to let you know that I was asked this exact question in round 1 or round 2. Do you want me to still answer this question, given I've already been asked it? And then it's up to your interviewer. If they say yes, then answer it. Tell them the same thing you told the last person. If you have another story that you think is great for that exact same question, sure, that's like ideal, but not many people do. And then it's on them if they aren't using the time to gather new and interesting data from you and they're just pulling in the same data from last time. But just make sure you tell them that you believe that you've had this question before. Okay, next question then. Okay, this is interesting, Sandy. So do I think it's okay to take notes in the interview? You want to make sure you're not repeating yourself and gathering notes from the interviewer. So I definitely recommend that you write down the question that you have been asked, both so that it gives you time to think about what you've been asked, process it, pull out the idea that you want, the example that you want to use in your head, and then share it. So I always recommend writing down the question. Beyond that, I'm not sure what type of notes you're going to want to write. I don't recommend with writing down what follow-up questions you are asked. I don't think that would be particularly useful for you at the other end of the interview. And I do think it will be very strange experience in the interview process for you to be pausing every time somebody asks you a follow-up question to write it down. So yes, definitely take down the interview question that you are asked, and maybe scribble down the example that you use so that you remember what example you use, like high level, whatever name you've given that example. But beyond that, I don't see a place for writing ongoing notes in an interview. I hope that was helpful. Indrani, you had your first phone screen. Cool. I hope it went well. Sorry, I'm just scrolling to see if I can find another question. Okay, here we go. Hi, how are you doing? So Dark Carol plays Apex. Cool. So you had your panel yesterday and all of the questions asked were behavior questions. Yes, that's what I would expect if you weren't in a technical role. Should you have answered all of them correctly to pass? You were asked a total of 12 questions. There's no correct answer, I guess. It's not about correct. It's about, are you demonstrating the leadership behaviors, the behaviors from the leadership principles that they're looking for in each of the questions that they're asking you? Are you using examples that reflect the scope and complexity of the role that you're applying for? So it's not math. There's no right answer or wrong answer. There's simply the extent to which you demonstrate the leadership principle behaviors that they're looking for and whether your examples match the scope and complexity. So there's no right or wrong. So it's kind of impossible for me to answer that. Does every single example have to be as good as does every single example have to be completely stellar in order for you to be able to get an offer? No, it's about all of the data pulled together into a pot. And when they look at the data overall, that overall data needs to suggest your bar raising. So you could have one or two not so strong examples against a pool of 8, 10 strong examples. And on balance, you end up looking strong. So that's kind of how it works. I hope that makes sense. Ah, okay. So Indrani, so you've had your first one, now you're going into a second one. So you want to know why a second screen and what they look for in a second phone screen that takes it apart from the first. So why have a second phone screen? To make absolutely certain that if you're going to spend or invest the time for 5 Amazonians and a bar raiser, or maybe 4 Amazonians and a bar raiser to prep for an interview a candidate and sit in a debrief, that you are really sure, or as sure as you can be, that that person is going to actually make it through loop. That's why you do a second round. It's not because there's anything lacking from the first. It's double checking that what you thought was a really strong candidate in the first place is still looking like a really strong candidate the second time you talk to them. So what are they looking for in a second interview? Nothing different to what they were looking for in the first interview. It's like stress testing. I don't know, if you're going to sit in a seat, if you were going to put your old granny in a seat and you just built it, you're going to give it a little bit of a wiggle and a push to make sure it doesn't collapse the first time. And you're going to go, yeah, okay, that looks good. And then you're going to give it another wiggle and a push and a stretch to see if it doesn't collapse the second time. And then you go, yeah, nope, now I feel good that I can sit granny in this chair and it's not going to collapse underneath her. I appreciate that is probably the bizarrest analogy that you've heard, but that's the point of principle. You are stress testing that what you thought was true when you first spoke to this person is true the second time you speak to them. So you're willing to risk investing, I don't know, 10 hours of more Amazonian time in a loop. So if you made it past the first, just do more of the same, and your outcome hopefully should be good. Okay. Oh, yeah, this is another good one. Hey, Wanderlust. So is the person doing the second interview definitely the hiring manager? And are they going to be in the loop as well? So no, not all teams do it the same way round. So some teams will have the hiring manager at the first round and then a close team member or peer at the second round. Other teams will do it the other way and have a peer in the first round and the hiring manager in the second round. Will your hiring manager be at loop? Almost certainly. For some roles, no. But the majority of roles, yes. The only time really where it makes sense for a hiring manager not to be at loop is for the types of roles that are really kind of high volume mass roles, usually more junior roles, where the hiring manager just is super confident that the other people on the loop will know what bar raising for them looks like, and they usually have quite large teams and don't tend to work really, really closely one-to-one with individuals. So brand manager roles tend to be more likely to not have somebody who's the hiring manager at the loop. But pretty much for all other roles, you'll have a hiring manager at loop. Okay, so yeah, hopefully that answers that question. Firaz, hello, welcome, lovely to see you. Okay, let me just read this one from Mo. Gone away citing advice. Okay, all right. Hey, Mo. Oh, I like that I can really see your face. I mean, I'm assuming that's you. Quite often it's obviously I can't see people's faces. That's awesome to be able to actually see the person that I'm talking to. So thank you for that. Appreciate that. So your recruiter's gone away citing a revised offer is with comp, business, and HR for review / sign off, but they haven't advised you what the revised offer will be. Who is the business in this context? So the business will be the hiring manager. So the way Amazon compensation structure kind of organizationally works is there are literally comp analysts. So the recruiter doesn't actually have very much say or any say, I don't think, in what the actual offer is. They have to submit to the comp analyst the role, the individual, their experience, notes about the outcome of the actual loop, and the comp team come back with what they view as the right offer. And then the recruiter will sit down with the hiring manager, this happened to me many times, and talk them through the offer that's come from comp. If the business and the recruiter think that it's not quite there in terms of what is needed, they can then go back to the comp analyst to try and negotiate. Same goes with the candidate. If the candidate isn't happy with the offer and they want to go back, the candidate will talk to the recruiter and the recruiter will talk to the comp analyst. So that's kind of the chain. You kind of assume on the outside that it's simply a conversation that has to be had with the recruiter and you're negotiating with the recruiter. You're not. You're negotiating with 2 steps beyond the recruiter in terms of the comp analyst. You just never get to speak to them. The recruiter has to. So I hope that makes sense to you, Mo. Okay. Okay. Hey, Sam. Welcome back, Sam. Good to see you again. So you answered a question in one of the first interviews. Will the interviewer in the loop have the notes for that answer, or is it okay to reuse user experience? So yes, they will definitely have access to the notes from your earlier interviews. Is it okay to reuse it? Yes. The advice I always give, Sam, is avoid repeating examples if you can. If you can, being the operative words in that sentence, because sometimes you just don't have a choice. If you're going to repeat it, Sam, please try and use it for a different leadership principle. So hopefully you wrote down the question that you used that example against when you had your first interview. Look at that, work out what leadership principle you think you were answering then, and then use this example again for a different leadership principle. I actually do, I think, a pretty good demo of how you can take one scenario and reshape it completely for 2 different leadership principles in my interview preparation masterclass if you happen to be an Academy member. But that's the thing you really need to practice is this is the way I told it the last time. I need to find a way of telling it very differently this time by emphasizing very different elements of behaviors for a new leadership principle compared to the last time I did it. I do have, actually, I have in my lives previous to this done a real deep dive on repeats. I think it was definitely a Wednesday. I don't think it was last week. I don't think it was the week before. I think it was the week before that. So if you just trawl, Sam, through my history of live sessions, everything's chaptered. You'll find one of them where I do a key topic all about repeats. So hopefully that will help you as well. Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. Hey, George. So if you only have 2 interviewers for the final round, which is interesting, that's very strange and very rare. What principles should you focus on? So that's impossible for me to know, George, what principles you should focus on, because it's unique to each role. So George, you need to go back and have a look at your job description and go through your job description line by line by line and try and identify what the key leadership principles are by associating the language that they use with a leadership principle. The more times someone references a leadership principle in a job description, kind of based on my experience, the more important it is, because the more it's in the front of their minds if they're going to repeat it repeatedly in a job description. So I have 2 videos on my live playlist, which is me deconstructing job descriptions live. People come, I take their job ID and then I live. It's very nerve-wracking. I'm not a fan of doing it. I deconstruct it live for them. So go check those out, and that will help give you some guidance on how to do it yourself for your job description. I do provide it as a paid for service. So if you're interested in me doing it for you, you can click on a link in the description in that video and I can help you out. Okay. Ooh, okay. Yeah. Hey, Firas. So question about comp, and how do you answer the question about current or expected salary? So I refuse to answer a question about current salary. I know in some countries it's actually illegal to ask that question. It's not the case here in the UK where I am, but as far as I'm concerned, it's irrelevant information what my current salary is. The relevant information is what salary I expect to be offered by a new employer. So that's one part. The other part is, how do you answer the question? Do your homework. There are some websites that are useful for some countries. So levels.fyi, payscale.com, I think salary.com is another one. You can type in your job title, you can type in your location, and it will show you a range that is the market range for your particular area and your job. So what I do is I present to the recruiter the data that I've gathered and said, as I understand it, this is where I've got my source from. This is the range that I would expect given the seniority of the role and the location, and therefore my expectation is if you were to give me an offer, it would be within this range. That's how I handle it personally. When I go into a negotiation, I have a view of what my bottom line is. If they don't meet this, I will walk away, and what my goal is. And then at that point, I certainly get a sense of where they are between my bottom line and my goal, and I'm working towards my goal. So I hope that's helpful. You should, if you want to know more about salary negotiation, there is a lady called Amy Miller recruiting in yoga pants. Her name isn't Amy Miller recruiting in yoga pants. Her name is Amy Miller. And she then has recruiting in yoga pants on her YouTube channel, which I have in my featured channels, which is on the storefront in my YouTube homepage. Go click on Amy's YouTube channel. She's got a playlist called Let's Talk About Money. She's an Amazon recruiter. She's worked at Google. She's worked at Microsoft. She is the dogs. She's amazing. So click on her playlist, go to her YouTube channel, watch a whole bunch of her content that isn't salary based, because it's awesome content anyway, but her playlist will really help you out. Okay. Let's see what other questions we have. Okay, you have a question. Amazon have some age limit to hire personnel. Okay, so I think that you're asking me, do Amazon have an age limit to hiring personnel? No, that would be illegal. In the vast majority of countries I can think of around the world, you cannot discriminate on the basis of age. So I'm going to go all out and say no. Hope that was helpful. Yeah, okay. So I have mentioned writing down questions as a tip for the interview. Will the interviewer be okay with taking notes or having notes to reference? Okay, so it's a good question, Cameron. So I think any interviewer worth their salt should not have a concern with you having a very light set of notes. Obviously, in an Amazon interview, you're being asked to provide some very specific detail and some very specific data in many cases. An interview is not a memory test, right? You're not being hired because you can remember a ton of information. You're being hired because the information you share ticks boxes on the behaviors that they're looking for. So what I would say, and this is what I recommend to people, and this is what I do myself, is I don't have a little notebook with me. So I always say to my interviewer, I just want to let you know, I do have some very light bullet point notes here just to jog my memory if I need it. So please do forgive me if I just look down briefly occasionally. I promise you it will only be occasionally. I have never had anybody say no to me. Given the thousands and thousands of people who watch my content and have taken this tip on board, I have only ever had one candidate come back to me and tell me that their interviewer asked them to stop using their notes. Now, I can't tell you whether they were excessively staring down. Of course, they told me they weren't. Who knows? But I'm very confident that in the vast, overwhelming number of cases, if you just give your interviewer a heads up, and if you do only have very light bullet notes, you will be fine. Do not have notes on a screen. That is a disaster from my experience, because all you do is you get a candidate's eyes going over there and looking left and right and left and right and left and right, and it does not go well. So have a little bit of paper in front of you, like a little sheet of A4, a couple of sheets of A4, some post-it notes around your screen, whatever, and have very light notes on those, and you'll be fine. Okay, I hope that helps, Cameron. Hey, Mo. Right. So is there a point where a recruiter advises is a final offer? Yeah, for sure. And you should wait until that point to end any negotiation. Yes, look, it's about what your negotiation strategy is. If you want to keep pushing, then keep pushing and get yourself to a point where they say this is the final offer. Quite honestly, my recruiter told me that this was their final offer, and I pushed them again and it wasn't their final offer. So you kind of have to play it a little bit according to what is that salary band that we've identified as the market rate. How hard do you want to push? And make a decision on your own. Sometimes their final offer isn't actually their final offer. They just say it's their final offer. Good luck. Let's see, what else do we have here? Okay. Right. Good question, John. Hey, John, welcome. So you've got your panel tomorrow. Can you use examples that are not work-based, but are relative to the question asked to demonstrate competence, like a learn and be curious principle? Okay, so my advice here is, if you are an experienced professional, let's say you've got more than 3 years experience, you should really try to avoid not using work-based examples. The reason being is, if you find yourself using examples outside of work to demonstrate a leadership principle, the first thing that I'm thinking as an interviewer is, great, John can demonstrate this leadership principle for his football team. Why can he not do the same at work? Why is he not able to tell me about an example of learn and be curious is a bad one for football teams, but do you know what I'm saying? Why can he not do this in a work environment? Whereas if you talk to me about it in a work environment, then I'm saying, cool, yeah, John's got learn and be curious, and I can see it's completely relevant to here in Amazon because it's in a work context. So avoid it if you can. Now, if you don't have a large bank of experience, 3 years less, then your interviewer is going to be more understanding about why you might need to use an example that is outside of work, because you just haven't got a material amount of experience to be able to call on every single 16 leadership principles in a work context. But it would be a very edge case from an interviewer's point of view to be listening to an example that doesn't relate to a professional context. One other obviously exception to that is if you've had, say, a career break or something like that, and you've done a lot of volunteering in your career break, then again, as an interviewer, then I can get in my head, okay, clearly John can't give me an example in a work context because John hasn't been in work for the past 2 years, but yeah, he's been doing loads of incredible volunteering, and this is a great example based on volunteering. So I hope that helps. Let's move on then. Oh, that's so lovely, Andy. Hey, Andy, welcome back. So you had your loop yesterday. Yes, it is very, very intense. Totally. I will never forget my loop. I still remember it pretty much blow by blow. I could talk you through my interviewers, the questions they asked me, the answers I gave them. I know what they were wearing broadly. It's one of those things that just burns itself into your memory. And you are absolutely welcome. Do you know what? It's a privilege to be able to do this and to help people. And I take that privilege very, very seriously. And that's why I've done what I've done. And I've tried to make my expertise as accessible as possible while still trying to find a way to feed and clothe my children. I think it's a privilege. I think it's a privilege that some people abuse. Because clearly there's a lot of anxiety in the market about the mystery behind Amazon. It's very easy to abuse that privilege. I try not to. You can all call me out at any point if you think I am abusing that privilege, but I have my fingers so crossed for you, Andy. I hope it goes well, and it's an absolute pleasure. Delighted to be able to support you. Okay. Let's have a look. What else have we got? Right. Yep. So, hi, Gigi. Are there some time intervals that an applicant must meet to reapply if rejected? Yes, but it's not fixed. So, if you are rejected in the early rounds, you are very unlikely to have what they call a cool down period. If you do have a cool down period, your recruiter will tell you. But if you fail in the early rounds, very, very unlikely. When it comes to final round, loop, panel, whatever we're calling it, I use them all. Confuse everybody, and I use them all. When it comes to that, depending on the outcome of your loop. So I do have a video about this on my YouTube channel talking about the different outcomes. You can have a inclined, okay, let's ignore that. You can have a not inclined recycle. That means that the panel have decided that you probably weren't that far off being bar raising, or actually you're a very strong candidate, but you're just not quite right for this role. But if you applied for another role, you might get in. So they recycle you, which effectively means they throw you little fishy, they throw you back into the pond, and you're available for any other little fisherman to come along and hook. My analogies are cool today. I'm very proud of my analogies. We had tables earlier, and now we have ponds and fishermen. You're there back in the pond for anybody to kind of scoop out. The other outcome is a no recycle. So that's where the team feel that you're probably quite a long way off being able to be proven to be bar raising. And they are not going to throw you back straight into the pond. They'll tell you that you need to stay out of the pond. And if you're a fish, you die. So I'm not sure I chose the best analogy on this one, but just go with me. Pretend this fish has an ability to breathe outside the use of water and gills. And you'll be told what the cool-off period is. So some teams have 6 months cool-off period. Other teams have 12 months cool-off period. Your recruiter should tell you. I always think it's a good idea. Sometimes the recruiters forget to just be very specific and volunteer this information. So please, if you do get rejected, everybody, just check with your recruiter. When can I reapply, please? You don't have to ask, am I recycled? Am I not recycled? Blah, blah, blah. Just simply say to them, when can I reapply? And they should then tell you about whether you're on a cool-off period or not. I hope that helps. I'm really sorry about my terrible analogies. I should really think quite a long way in advance before I pick the analogy to make sure that I can carry it the whole way through. All right. Oh, yes. Hey, Aditya, how are you doing? Welcome back. So you've got your final round, which you believe is the bar raiser for an SD1. They're taking some time to schedule it. Is it normal? Okay. Oh, one more thing. My videos are great. Thank you. Right. Actually, do you know what I'm going to do? Before I answer that question, I forgot to do this and I should have done it. So please, I'm going to ask you to take a few seconds to like the stream. It makes a massive difference to the algorithm. And I've really noticed the difference in terms of where my content is surfacing since I asked people to start doing this. It makes such a difference if you put positive signals into YouTube for my content to be able to surface. I think the YouTube algorithm sucks. There's content that appears far above me that, if you ask me, is complete trash, but it's not my friend. So I need your help. So please, in return for what I do for you, can you please just go and stick the thumbs up on this stream? So I'm going to count down from 3, 2, 1 and ask you to just do it now in the moment so you don't worry about forgetting about it afterwards. So 3, I'm going to show you an amazing graphic whilst I do it. Next week will be better. 3, 2, 1. Please like the stream. Please, please like the stream. My content is good. It needs to surface better. Please like the stream. I have a secret squirrel story for you. I've actually had a very good country singer all the way from Nashville record a little song for this part of the session. So next Monday, tune in and you will hear a composed, that's it, a custom composed jingle for me by a big Nashville country singer, all about liking my stream. I know you're so excited. You're so excited, I know. So there we go. Begging over, humiliation over. We'll move on to that question. So is it normal for it to take a while to schedule? Yeah, especially for a bar raiser. Not only are they doing their day job, but they're also bar raising. Usually they have to do 2 a week. So it can take a while to schedule. Shouldn't really, but I think they're absolutely slammed over in Amazon at the moment. All of the stories that I'm hearing, the actual process is completely creaking at the seams. So yes, I can imagine why it might be taking a while, but keep pushing them, right? This is your interview. It's your customer experience. Keep pushing them and following up to get that final interview. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. Let's see what other questions we have. Okay, hey Sandeep. So I'm going to take a guess at this one because I am not, as I said, I cannot be a technical expert in exactly what everyone's going to do on every single panel for every single type of role. So you're asking me for an engagement manager. You've got 1 interviews with someone from DevOps. Can you expect LPs? I'm going to guess for the fact that they're probably just going to be LP focused rather than asking you any particular technical questions. Unless there's someone absolutely in your line, you would probably expect them to be focused on behavioral questions. Now, I can't swear to that because, as I said, I cannot possibly know the technical details and the specificity of every single job role, but I have had people in my academy who have gotten roles as engagement managers, and as such, I'm guessing that the DevOps person wouldn't be asking you technical questions. Oh, this is a good BR question. I should write this one down for the next time that I do the BR deep dive. So will the BR be the last person on the loop? Yes, I get asked this frequently. I don't know why I didn't think of it. No, no, not at all. It's just chance. They will just fit you into their calendar as and when they can fit you into their calendar. So no, being the last person on the loop is definitely no indicator that they are the bar raiser. Okay, but thanks for asking it, because now I've written that one down and I'll remember to cover it off next time. All right. Hey, Enzio. Thank you. Is it true that some questions during the interview stage will only require a portion of your leadership principle story to answer, i.e. less is more rather than crowbarring everything in? So look, it depends what you mean by less is more, and it depends what you mean by crowbarring everything in. You should put in everything that is relevant to the leadership principle if you've managed to identify the leadership principle. There's lots of debate about how long your answer should be. In my view, it's going to be somewhere between 4 and 10 minutes, depending on your seniority and depending on the complexity of the answer that you give. So it's almost impossible to answer that question that you've asked me, because the question in unto itself doesn't actually make sense, not criticizing you in any way, but you just need to be listening to the question and answering the question. Now, whether the answer to that question only requires a portion of your example because your example is enormous and you could easily take a chunk out of it and use that for that particular question and then not need to use the rest of it. Yes, that definitely happens. Is that a rule that applies to every single question and every single example? Well, no, it can't possibly be, because some examples will be much simpler, and therefore that person would need to use the entirety of that example in order to be able to answer the question. So broadly speaking, just answer the question and make sure you put in all of the content that you need to put in order to answer the question. Don't chuck in everything that you've ever thought of saying or thinking about that particular example. That I agree on, but answer the question. Okay, I hope that kind of helps. Okay. Yeah, okay. Hey, so what can we expect in a bar raiser round for the SDM L6? And is the writing example mandatory for SDM L6? So yes, I would expect you as an SDM at L6 to have to do a writing sample. So yes, I would. And then what can you expect in the bar raiser round? So you should expect in the bar raiser round exactly what you would expect in every other round for an SDM. They will be asking you behavioral questions. There's no doubt about that. In Amazon, SDMs are not expected to be coders. I know that's different in places like Facebook, but I don't believe you'll have technical coding. You will have systems design, but not actual coding challenges. If you haven't already yet seen on my YouTube channel a video that I did with Vivek, who was 10 years in Amazon as an engineering leader, he's now at Facebook. I have a specific video on SDM that goes into deep detail in terms of what you can expect at that interview and what they're looking for. So please do check that one out. It's amazing. Vivek rocks. Okay, so I'm going to cover off one more question because we are at time and my tummy, it is a rumbling. So let's just see what we've got here. Jess has asked a couple. So let me just quickly read them. Okay. Okay. All right. So Jess, I'll do both of them. I have done your first question before. So let me just cover this one off quickly. Does under consideration in the jobs dashboard normally lead to a phone interview? No. It literally means they are looking at your application and are considering it. So no, it shouldn't read anything into it other than I put it in and someone's looking at it. Okay, so then your next question. So I have definitely answered this one before, but it keeps coming up. So for sure, Jess, I will answer the question. What do I think of the pip culture in Amazon? So I can obviously only talk to you about my personal experiences at Amazon and experiences of people that I have worked with. Okay, so bear that in mind. I'm a marketer, and what I'll tell you is you always have to be very careful with data that is a sample size of 1. You also need to be very careful when you think about scale, right? Amazon is massive, massive. So in any organization, there will be people who are unhappy. The larger the organization, the more visible that group of people will be because they're more present, because there's more of them. And of course, the more well-known the organization is, the more visible becomes. So, just bear that in mind when you're looking at all of this stuff online. PIP process. So I was a manager at Amazon. I had a very large team in the context of what you would usually find internationally in Amazon. I ran the European, well, a few different things, but I ran marketing operations for Europe Prime Video. I did manage people through the PIP process, but I'd say 75% of the people that I took through the PIP process came out the other side, stayed in their roles, lifted their game. All of the people that I took through a PIP process are still at Amazon. So five years later, after that particular role that I was just referring to, they're still at Amazon. A number of them have got promotions since. So it is not a death sentence going through the PIP process, and it is intended to identify the people who need some support and need to improve and get coached and lift their game. That's its purpose. Its purpose is not meant for managing people out directly. 25% of the people I managed through PIP did exit the organization. After the process, we aligned on the fact that this was not a place where they wanted to be and not a place where they were going to be successful, and they found themselves other roles. Now, as I say, that was in the UK. I cannot talk about any experiences in other countries. Has, from a management point of view, anybody ever communicated to me that the PIP process is intended for the purpose of supporting people to improve their performance? Never. That was the intended purpose of the process, and that was always what was communicated to me. Are people somewhere in Amazon abusing it? Maybe. I never came across them, but that doesn't mean to say they aren't. Sample size of one, as I said, but my experience of it was a positive. The people around me treated it with respect and positively. I'm sure there are loads of horror stories out there. I've seen a whole website dedicated to horror stories, but Amazon's massive. There's like 1.3 million employees in the world. That's the population of Dublin. Oh, if you don't know, Dublin is the capital of Ireland. It's massive. And therefore, it's very, very easy to get high volume stories of people that have had a really hard time. Proportionately, you'll go into any company and I'll bet you find people who have the same horror stories. There's just not as many of them because the companies are smaller and it's not as kind of cool to bash those companies as it is to bash companies that are in FANG. That's my experience anyway, Jess. That's all I can share with you. Okay, can a hiring manager be a BR as well? No, absolutely not. No, the whole point of a BR is to be an independent third party that has no skin in the game whatsoever. So, and if the role doesn't get filled, it makes no difference to them. The hiring manager is the opposite of unbiased. They have tons of skin in the game. And if the role doesn't get hired, they're going to have to keep doing extra work. So no, hiring manager and bar raiser cannot be the same person. All right, so we are now over time. So I think I'm going to wrap up in... people keep asking questions that I then want to answer. Stop it, you naughty, naughty people. I need to have my dinner. But okay, I will answer this question. Right, I'm going to go for this one. You heard that there's no work-life balance and they fire people easily without notification. All right, Marwa. So I'm going to break this into two parts. So work-life balance. As I said, I was at Amazon for quite a few years. I worked in my head's just doing something crazy there, sorry. I worked in a number of different roles and two major different departments. So I worked in Prime Video and I worked in Amazon Fresh. My experience of work-life balance between those two teams was very, very different. And that's because my role and the development state of those two businesses were very different. So in Prime Video, I was in a business that was in absolute stellar growth, hockey stick mode. We were expanding into multiple different European countries. My jobs, I had a few different jobs, but one particular role, I was responsible, as I said a minute ago, for leading all of the marketing operations for the whole of Europe. So every single piece of marketing that ever went out for Prime Video in Europe went through my team. Direct mail, emails, push notifications. I owned the actual storefront itself, above the line advertising, partnerships, everything, paid search, all of that. It all came through my team. I had no work-life balance at all. I worked, the sun followed me around. I was always talking to people in all parts of the world all of the time. And it was a really, really tough job at the time because of where we were and the type of role that I had. My other role, I worked in Amazon Fresh. We were just launching Amazon Fresh stores in the UK. Excuse me. It was very early days. We hadn't launched yet, so we were doing all of the basic build, startup type stuff. My work was quite conceptual. I was creating processes. Nothing was being implemented. Had a fantastic work-life balance. Brilliant. Left home on a sensible hour, came home at a sensible hour, didn't get emails out of hours. Very, very different experience. So yeah, at some points in my career, in my time at Amazon, I had a terrible work-life balance. Other times I didn't. So like any other job anywhere else in the world or in any other company, there are peaks and troughs. And it depends on where you are in the team and where your business unit is. So that's the first thing. Fire people easily without notification. Well, again, I can't speak to the entire world and every single team and every single part of the globe. I can only tell you about my experiences. So I've never fired anybody in Amazon and never saw anybody fired. People were who left teams when it didn't work out, but no one was ever fired. But I worked in the UK and we have very, very different labor laws in Europe than the labor laws that exist in the US. So I really can't comment on whether they fire people at the drop of the hat in the US. I didn't see in my career a revolving door of people coming in and suddenly disappearing a couple of weeks later. That wasn't my experience. But again, how many, I worked with a good few hundred, let's say, people over the course, maybe 300 or 400 people over the course of my 5-ish years at Amazon. So, you know, I don't necessarily agree that this is a global statement that you can make, but I'm sure there are certain teams where the approach to maintaining talent or not maintaining talent is completely different to my experience. So I hope that helps to some degree. Okay, so, ATS question. So as they do the first filtering CVs, do they automatically or are they reviewed manually? So I believe from my conversations with recruiters in Amazon, they'll review all of them manually. There will be some knockout questions based on whether you have the right to work in a country, those types of things that exist. But broadly speaking, I believe recruiters in Amazon are all reading your resumes. ATS will look for matches to the types of kind of the keywords to the role, and kind of, I believe it kind of stack ranks those that match really highly and those that don't match so highly. But from all of the recruiters I've been speaking to at Amazon, your CV will be, or resume, or your CV, so you're not in the US, okay? Your CV will be looked at by a human being. All right, so we are well over time now. I want to share with you before you go, because I also forgot to mention at the beginning that I have an amazing freebie. So I'm going to give you this amazing freebie. Do not leave without looking at this amazing freebie. Go to the AmazonInterviewWizAcademy.com. Grab yourself, you're entitled to this, completely free, my Customer Obsession Masterclass. Will tell you everything you need to know about customer obsession, all of the different facets. I've created a new way of understanding the leadership principles that nobody else does, and it's awesome. Trust me, it's awesome. I have amazing feedback from Amazonians on that particular approach to the leadership principles. It will tell you pretty much what your interviewer is looking for, exactly what your interviewer is looking for when it comes to customer obsession. And you'll see a mock interview, me interviewing me. So you can see how it all comes together actually in an interview. Totally, totally free. I want you to take it. I want you to love it. And of course, I want you to buy more of my product. But if you don't, I know that if you make it through the interview process, you will all get asked questions on customer obsession. So you would be crazy not to take this offer of this completely free course. I don't do chaser marketing. I'm not doing this to get your email address. I know that's why most people do it. I'm not. I want you to see the content because I really believe in my content. So please go get it. There is literally no good reason why you would not go and grab this content for free. Right. So on that note, thank you so much for joining. Really great questions, some good challenging questions as well. So I really appreciate that. Please come back again on Monday and you will see my amazing graphics and my specially written country song for asking you to like the stream. Please like the stream. Whoever's left, if you haven't liked the stream, please, please do. And if you haven't, why would you not? Thank you very much. Be safe. Take care. Good luck with your interviews coming up, and I will hope to see you again next week. Bye-bye.